Okay, everyone, welcome to the first sleep discussion that we have on a research article. So, I am GeneralNguyen, and I've been preparing a presentation for this uh, research article. So, the research article that we are talking about today is the different sleep patterns of medical students. There is the original article, as you can see right here, and also in the reference section in this presentation. So I want to thank everyone in Discord who makes this discussion available and audible for people out there who want to listen to it and find out more about the topic of polyphasic sleeping or sleep related issues that they want to explore. So with that out of the way, to start with the article, the abstract of the article is the summary of what you would like to look at, because it's very brief and it doesn't really contain too many complicated details at all. So for this article, the objective of the whole study was to identify medical students' different sleep patterns and how that correlates to their own academic performance as well as their sleep habits. So in this case, we are looking at three different kinds of sleep patterns: monophasic sleep, biphasic sleep, and other non-identified polyphasic sleep schedules. The design of the study was just cross-sectional questionnaire survey, and this whole survey process lasted for a month in 2013. The method for the study was just to determine the sleep patterns and then collecting the data of 347 students during the 4 years in the college. In a college, to be more specific, it's the Jinnah Medical and Dental College in Karachi, if you want to know the specifics. For the results of this study, we have 38.9% monophasic students, 46.7% biphasic students, and 14.4% polyphasic students. And out of these numbers, 67.4% of the monophasic students and 87% of the biphasic students and 66% of the polyphasic students pass the exam. So to measure the pass and fail in this exam, the study was based on if the overall grade was below or above 50%. So above 50% is a pass and below 50% is a fail. And to conclude, this study said that the biphasic students performed the best during the whole duration of the study, and because it has been proven through the circadian rhythm of 2 sleep phases by having the main sleep at night and having some daytime sleep. And it is worth noting that the study also calls to college professionals to encourage this kind of sleeping pattern, because biphasic students showed to do very well during the midterm exam. And that's basically the abstract of the article. So next, the introduction of the article was pretty simplistic. It's just some generic setup and lead in about sleep and what it does and what kind of sleep patterns they actually are. The focus was on monophasic, biphasic, and polyphasic sleeping as 3 different categories. And the main mentions in the introduction was the 8 hours of quality sleep being very important. And polyphasic sleep is defined as taking multiple naps per day, even though we know that this definition was kind of archaic, and there's more flexibility in polyphasic scheduling now. There is also some mention of partial sleep deprivation or worse degrees of sleep deprivation. So it's about less than 6 hours of sleep at night, and this leads to the lack of attention, cognitive performance decreasing the next days, and stuff like that. And it is also notable that for people, especially students with inconsistent sleep patterns, pretty much like the random schedule in the Discord, as you see people with those schedules designated by their names, it is also observed that they have more problems with mental processing, clarity, thought process, articulation, and also suffer from loss of memory. So those are pretty common knowledge and basic problems that we see from sleep deprivation and just irregular sleep all around. So for the results of this study, we have the mean age for the students being 20.5. So that means everyone is 20 years old or something like that, or more than that.
It's a bit odd. It says 20 years plus minus 6 months as the standard deviation. However,
Okay.
I find that very odd since they took 4 college years of students. So I'm really not sure what's going on there, but it's a bit of an oddity.
I mean, it's the mean. So
Yeah,
there are
but
people.
50% of students was between 19 and a half and 20 and a half years.
It doesn't have to be 50%. It's the group with the highest amount of people, so it could be like 26% too.
Yeah. I mean, even though the mean age is a little bit lower than what I expect to be, I expected something like 21 or around that.
I mostly expected a larger standard deviation, though I suppose this is possible if a lot of students drop out after years 1 and 2. Let's move on.
Yeah, that's totally possible. It's medical school anyway. The ratio of male to females in this study was 1 to 3. So we actually witnessed like a lot of potential female polyphasic sleepers in the study. I mean, even though there was no explicit mention of it. But here you can look at the graph. There are two different categories: monophasic, biphasic, and polyphasic sleeper. And the most people actually went for some kind of biphasic sleeping. And none of the scheduling in here was actually mentioned because probably they didn't go into details, or maybe it's too hard to compile the whole thing. So I guess we just have to go with unidentified sleep scheduling. You can also look at the pass and fail ratio, pretty straightforward data. Um, when I first looked at this, I was actually surprised that polyphasic sleepers could actually manage to have a pretty decently high passing grade percentage. Even though it's actually the group that has also the highest failing grade compared to the other two. But if you actually look at the data, there is something pretty important here that I think is that polyphasic sleeping compared to monophasic sleeping doesn't really change that much. And what I mean is that you can achieve the same results or better because the data is pretty much the same between the two categories.
One thing to note here, though, is that later on they state, as far as polyphasics are concerned, although they had the highest amount of sleep duration, so Apparently, the people sleeping polyphasically in this study slept more than the people on bi or monophasic, on average at least.
Yeah, I mean, I understand why it happened. We'll get into detail more about that as we get to the discussion section. But this is just the data that they collected, and that's pretty much it.
I want to make a quick little point here that I think it's really crazy that there were most people who were biphasic, like you said, general, and that a whole 50 people were sleeping polyphasically out of around 350 people. That's really great to hear.
Yeah, it actually really is. Like the numbers are actually higher than what at least I expected it to be. Probably because these people also practice polyphasic sleeping, but they actually don't know what kind of schedule they are doing. They just probably add like a bunch of naps, or I guess in 2013 they probably heard of Everyman Sleep because it has been mentioned literally everywhere on the net. So probably some kind of Everyman Sleep or some random 7 mile is probably something that they did, even though at the time we haven't really understood those fully. Okay, so for the discussion section, as the analysis from the data that have been gathered, and here we focus on the sleep habits and circadian rhythms and what contribute to higher or lower academic performance. So it is said in the study that most students are biphasic, but they actually got enough sleep. So what I think is that these students got enough sleep, so they technically don't reduce any kind of sleep from the schedules, even though there probably are some students who try to reduce their sleep, but we don't know any data from this. So it's probably some outliers. It is also said that these students are more prone to oversleeping. So what I think is that these biphasic students probably tried to reduce their sleep time, but they are prone to oversleeping because they probably didn't stick to their sleep times as consistently as they were supposed to do. So their so-called adaptation was probably never complete, and oversleeping was probably bound to happen, and they probably didn't really care that much if they happened to oversleep. So yeah, that's the point there. The next point in the discussion section is that polyphasic students overslept the most, and their sleep was very, very inconsistent. So it's like waking up in bad sleep stages, like in the middle of REM or slow wave sleep, or just whatever that is. They probably just slept randomly all around, sleeping in different chunks, and then at one point it is impossible to keep up with the alarm system, and so they ended up oversleeping. So that's my guess. The mean sleep duration was 7.7 hours, so that is actually a very realistic number, very close to the 8-hour monophasic sleep that is actually recommended or set as an example for monophasic sleeping. Those who sleep enough are bound to be biphasic. This is a very interesting point.
The mean sleep duration was from all medical students, as I read it. So as well,
Okay.
the monophasic, the biphasic, and the polyphasic students all grouped together.
Okay, but I mean, 7.7. It's not as unrealistic as something like, say, 6 or 8.5 or something around that. So I guess it's fine.
It would have been good for the completers of the study to have included how long the specific sleep pattern groups slept. Like now we just have a mean age for everyone, but not specifics for the biphasic and polyphasic.
Yeah.
I also think
The
that they
next
should
point.
have probably. Sorry, I think they should have also stated about
Okay.
oversleep. What's the definition for them for oversleep? Because oversleep for monophasic is different for polyphasic, you know, and having different sleep schedules. Of course, here it even says about REM sleep that they weren't getting enough REM sleep on polyphasic. If they were already sleeping for several times a day, oversleeping would be sleeping for 8 hours during those huge amounts of naps, you know.
Yeah, that's a fair point. I think probably it is safe to assume that the vast majority, if not all, of these students didn't have a proper dark period, as we call it, and say like sometime in complete darkness before bedtime. So with that going out of the window, I mean they probably didn't really get quality sleep, and so it requires much more sleep than usual, like in the day and so on, to catch up with the requirement of REM sleep and slow wave sleep.
It's also interesting to see that they make claims about REM sleep while not monitoring their sleep stages in any way.
Yeah, that too. There's several things that are a bit odd about the studies. There's some methods that they apparently use that are not described at all, and they start off with, for humans, 8 hours of good quality sleep at night is important. And then they go to recommend biphasic sleep of in total perhaps 8 hours. So there's several inconsistencies and missing references in that way. So I'm not extremely impressed with the writers of the paper. So I think we mostly have to draw our own conclusions here.
Yeah, I mean the method of conducting this study was just survey questionnaire. So I mean there was nothing about EEG equipment to find out what kind of sleep stage each student woke up from, because the sample was so big. It was 347 students. So I mean
Yeah,
it's not
so
going to be easy for you to monitor all of that.
that makes it extremely weird how they're able to confidently state, moreover, our study agreed with the hypothesis about the importance of rapid eye movement sleep and its importance in memory collection. If they didn't measure any of that, except perhaps some memory.
Yeah, I mean REM is something very common, and that's what people talked about, and I mean these researchers as well. I mean it's about I mean REM is like super important, and it's just like an all around required sleep stage that you have to get every single day. So I mean that's why they said it as a hypothesis rather than something that they can actually draw from the data, because there was no data anyway. The only thing that I found kind of left out is about the slow wave sleep, because I mean it mostly but it does physical recovery and stuff like that, but it also contributes to memory consolidation and giving the brain restful sleep, which was not mentioned enough in the study, at least. Because from what I remember from some time ago when I studied a in a biology course, the instructor said that the instructor said that REM sleep is something that helps you recall the things that you just studied. It's good for those kind of things, but slow wave sleep is actually something that you store in more long-term memory. So the stuff that you actually study from longer, that has been accumulated to that point. And that is also something very important that wasn't mentioned sufficiently in the study. Yeah.
Yeah, these people make no mention to deep sleep whatsoever, not slow wave sleep, NREM 3, or deep sleep, none of that, which is strange.
Yeah, and basically with no dark period that these students had, which probably they didn't. then it means that their slow wave sleep goes out the window, and it's a very horrible quality, and they just need to sleep like a lot more than usual just to make up for that. So the next point in here is that those who sleep enough are bound to be biphasic. So I think this is actually very interesting, because that actually implies that biphasic sleeping is a normal thing or natural thing that is possible in humans, and it's not just a segmented sleep that we have already known. And so biphasic sleeping is also possible, but I think that this probably has to do with the non-reduced sleep scheduling. So like if your total sleep on monophasic is like 8 hours to feel rested, so when you change to biphasic, you probably sleep like 6.5 hours or something at night, and then 90 minutes or like 2 hours in the day. So you basically have no sleep deprivation. And without a doubt, biphasic sleeping had the best recalling ability in those students with REM sleep being not interrupted, and they have consistent sleep patterns, so it helps. Now come the analysis about polyphasic sleeping. It says that polyphasic sleeping interrupted the continuous sleep architecture, so there was interruption in REM sleep, and implying that these students woke up in REM, so they didn't have a chance to finish that whole REM cycle or something along that line. And they said that polyphasic students had the highest sleep duration because they probably didn't have a strict plan of what time to really wake up, or what kind of schedule specifically that they wanted to follow. So I mean, this leading to like a high amount of total sleep, but most of that is probably light sleep or something less important than slow wave sleep and REM sleep anyway. So it's just the inflation of the total sleep amount, but the quality of sleep is actually pretty horrible. That's how I perceive this to be. Do you have any comments on this analysis?
I want to comment that I didn't find anything about them claiming that the students were healthy, which would be something that would, in my opinion, important to add or draw some conclusions whether they had some sleep issues and therefore were forced to sleep in strange patterns or something similar.
Yeah, right. There wasn't any mention about this whole health condition of these medical students, so there could be some exceptions with horrible sleep hygienes and stuff like that. Not a big surprise, to be honest.
Since they make the point that polyphasic sleepers were experiencing interrupted sleep, that could easily be explained by them having insomnia, for example, and being woken up, staying awake for a bit, and going back to sleep. They didn't specify how long the polyphasic segments should have been like gapped or separated in order to be classified as polyphasic sleep and not just interrupted monophasic sleep. So that's also something really strange in this article.
Oh yes, that actually reminds me of the heretic Zoidberg schedule that actually was tried out in the Discord community. It basically is just interrupted monophasic sleeping, and of course with that amount of interruption in the whole core sleep, and it's not going to be something good. And lastly, the higher grade students have shown to have fixed scheduling, and that means that their sleep is very consistent in a certain window of time, like going to sleep at 10 p.m. or 11 p.m., just something like that. And the ones who received lower grades displayed that they had shorter night sleep and more daytime drowsiness. And I think this really makes sense because in order to make up for sleep, they have to sleep more in the day, and then because they are not adapted to anything specific, that means that their daytime sleep is also messed up, and they had to remain in the constant state of drowsiness and like low motivation, low productivity whatsoever, because they were just plagued by sleep deprivation. It was a painful thing because I actually have seen a lot of examples in real life, like a bunch of my friends who were just grinding hard for college entrance and stuff like that, and how sleep deprived and just tiring they actually look. So yeah. So that's pretty much the whole study. It was pretty straightforward from the discussion thing. Now I now I think we probably have more discussion from the study about polyphasic sleeping and what we can actually do to make improvements to our lifestyle or to fit our certain lifestyles, because everyone is very different, not just for medical students or everyone else can also choose to adopt polyphasic sleeping. So the first thing is that there was no adaptation mentioned in the study, because probably adaptation was something that people weren't really familiar with at that time. So they didn't follow any kind of sleep pattern. They just stick with whatever they want. And so it is safe to say that the students at the time were unaware of how to do polyphasic sleeping properly. And so because they had no idea how to do that, or probably too much preparation or something like that, then it didn't lead them anywhere, because there was still a pretty big portion of students failing the exam, 34%. So those are probably the more extreme cases of polyphasic sleeping done wrong, or you have people who went for Uberman sleep before exams, like 2 days before exams, and then just straight up went into the exam room and then took the test, and of course it probably didn't go well. Sleep repartitioning didn't get mentioned at all in the study, which is understandable, because it is also a mechanic about sleep reduction, and because there was no such thing mentioned at all, then the students' sleep was probably in the state that how do I say it? Probably before any real adaptation took place. So it was still pretty much the same. The only thing was that they just got more and more light sleep, and there's slow wave sleep and REM sleep got replaced by NREM2. So that probably gave them non-restful sleep throughout the whole duration of the study, or from their sleep habits in the past, and that is actually a very bad thing. No reduction in sleep, that is actually something pretty obvious, because in order to avoid being sleep deprived, then usually you have to sleep the same amount or something like that, close to the same amount every day. And I think it doesn't matter what kind of sleep you do, whether monophasic or biphasic, you will still end up with the same thing pretty much, if you don't force any kind of sleep deprivation adaptation. The next thing is that because there was no polyphasic sleeping schedules mentioned at all, so I think it's safe to assume that it's pretty random sleeping, flexing sleep all around, and students having no idea if the schedule will work or not. And again, it was 2013 during the study, so at the time there was certain knowledge about Uberman sleep and everyman sleep, and I think that those two sleep schedules were predominant in the way that these students carried them out, even though they probably didn't hear of something like that, because if something doesn't really look like Uberman and something with a core sleep, so I think we can assume that it's some kind of weird everyman schedule. or just random. They just sleep whenever they like, and it's never the same every day. And I don't think that's actually a good thing. And so that's why the random schedule is kind of discouraged, because of the mess up in circadian rhythm. It's kind of like you are working a third shift, and then the next day or the next 2 days you don't work the third shift anymore, and you work in the day. So I mean, it's just kind of like that, and it's actually very dangerous for health in the future. The next point is that REM sleep becomes jammed in continuous sleep after adaptation. So I mean, this is just a part of polyphasic sleeping adaptation anyway, because when you get used to some kind of schedule, for example, DC1, your sleep in the morning will pretty much will have all the REM sleep that you need for the day, plus the nap in noon, afternoon, or something like that. So the study is saying that the REM sleep being interrupted in the student's sleep makes sense, but not enough to draw a conclusion that that REM sleep being interrupted in polyphasic sleeping was always present. That's not true, because we know that there is an adaptation process, and we can wake up feeling very fresh, and it's a very different feeling from when you wake up feeling sleep deprived, or when you just wake up and you just want to go back to bed. That's totally different stories.
Yeah, especially since a lot of adapted people commonly have natural wakes on their naps as well as the course. So I don't see that interrupting REM sleep if it's a natural wake.
Yeah, and the study also mentioned that the definition of polyphasic sleeping was based on multiple naps in the day, but they didn't say how long each nap was, because I mean, for monophasic sleep, people who sleep like 7 or 8 hours in one go, then a 3 hour sleep or a 4 hour sleep can be considered a nap, because I have actually heard people say that to me personally. So I mean, these 3 hour or 4 hour naps or whatever would easily add up to 10 or something like that during the day. So it becomes like giant oversleepings, or just people lying in bed and can't really fall asleep. And I have actually seen people post about lying in bed for like an hour or even 2 hours, but can't really fall asleep, and that actually counts towards their sleep time, whether they sleep or not, because they actually spend time to lie down and for that sleeping activity. So I think an oversleep could be counted in that way. So like spending 10 hours in bed, but actually slept like 7 or 8, and that's not good.
That's exactly what I'm doing, in fact.
Yeah, well, I mean, if you are just monophasic sleep anyway, then if you just follow that sleep pattern, then it will probably take you like 10-15 minutes to fall asleep if you have certain sleep hygienes, and if you have some kind of a habit of going to sleep around certain time at night on a consistent basis, then you could probably cut it down like that.
Yeah, Edward unfortunately changed something radical in his lifestyle, which caused him to take forever to fall asleep. But we can discuss that at another time.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, yeah. And the last question that I want to discuss from this study is how much sleep is actually enough. I know that there is no answer to this, and in the study, as I've said earlier, that there was a point that I would bring back here, and the point was that the study said that 8 hour monophasic sleep with good quality at night is important. But I find it kind of misleading, because not everyone can lie in bed for 8 hours straight. That's the thing. And even in teenage years, people don't usually have the same sleep amount. I mean, there's a recommended amount like 7 hours or more, but to say that 8 hours sleep monophasic at night is important is a little bit misleading there, at least.
At the age of about 20, I actually think that 8 hours is about the official recommended amount. So I don't find that a very odd number. It just lacks a source.
Yeah, I mean, it's fair to say that rather than if you put in like 7 instead of 8, but again, there has been quite a bit of data showing that our sleep has been reduced in the current era compared to before. So like we are sleeping less and less as time goes on because more time to work and do other things, and also the effect of the whole change in social structures and environmental factors and stuff like that as well.
Yeah, unfortunately, sleep deprivation is a pandemic in our current world.
Yeah, and it makes it actually pretty damn hard to find out the exact amount of sleep that we actually need for each day, because on a monophasic sleeping, it could be, I don't know, very random. Like in the past, I've had days where I lie in bed for about 9 hours to feel rested, and then some days I just needed about 6.5 or 6, and then I just couldn't sleep anymore. And that's something weird, and it had to take me like a very very long time for the course of years to actually find out like on the average kind of duration that I actually need for each day, which is about 7.5 hours for now, I guess.
I think it can also play a huge role in that just every day is a different day. So after a very busy day, you simply need a bit more sleep. And if you've done a lot of new things, you will need more sleep for memory consolidation. Or if you were very active, you need more sleep for physical repair. And I think that's pretty logical. And on top of that, there's a bunch of hormonal balances that just fluctuate wildly. That'll just throw it all off again. So it will vary, and that's pretty normal.
Oh yeah, and not to mention people with much higher sleep needs than usual. For example, athletes. I mean, I've read stories, their interview saying that they need like 10 hours of sleep each day, and that wasn't something abnormal at all. But the problem is that during those 10 hours, their slow wave sleep was probably much higher than an average human being. So that explains why the whole duration thing was much longer, and it also makes sense in that way. Now, for example, through different measures of the Zio device sleep tracking in the past, I think that I need around 80 minutes of slow wave sleep in the day, which is probably a little bit lower than usual, but I think I've been living with that for years, and it's still fine. So that's the amount that I have. But for these athletes, they probably have like 3 hours of slow wave sleep or even more to repair all of their muscles and all the grinds that they put on their body. So the occupation is also something that matters.
Speaking of exercising, it like on the while we are on the topic, it's pretty interesting to see that while we live in a world that's full of sleep deprivation, there are also these other types of people who are on the opposite side of the spectrum who are like obsessed with sleeping 10 hours a day or 11 hours a day for physical recovery. And that's so odd because every single one has individual sleep needs. And if you can't sleep more than 9 hours, don't try to sleep more than 9 hours. What's the point in that? You're not going to magically get more slow wave sleep from doing it. You're not going to build more muscles because you're doing that. If you sleep without an alarm and don't have any medical cautions, you're going to sleep as long as you need. If you need to take a nap during the day, take a nap during the day, sleep as long as you need then. But don't try to force yourself to sleep like 14 hours or 12 hours a day if you don't need that.
Yeah, exactly. Especially if those who want to do polyphasic sleeping. I mean, you kind of have to have restriction on the amount that you want to sleep each day, because you want to be awake after all. Because in your sleep you don't feel anything, and basically a day just passes by very quickly, especially at night. Do you have anything to add? You can go ahead.
Another aspect that could be taken into account is cultural differences. I mean, this was done in Pakistan, I think, and the university system. I don't know how it works, how it might be, but there are different like university systems in the world, and it might be that they have different courses at different times during the day, and they can sleep sometimes during lunchtime, sometimes only in the afternoon. Sometimes their mornings are completely filled, and so might explain why they can't have a consistent sleeping pattern every day, because every day is different for them. And this is why REM sleep doesn't come in, and this is why they can't retain all the information possibly, which could impact their grades and GPA basically.
Yeah, adding to what you said, the siesta or the noon rest from the translation, people in Spain and UK, if I remember correctly, actually adopts that kind of sleep, and in some places the shops are closed during that time, so they actually have time to rest around noon for a little bit. And different sources say a little bit differently. Some say it's a short nap around noon, like 20-30 minutes. Some say it's 90 minutes. So I guess it depends.
I want to draw back the attention to their lack of definitions for gaps between sleeps on polyphasic schedules. Since Pakistan has a very large Muslim population, I bet several of the polyphasic people actually take a gap during their mono night to pray, and therefore the value could be, bumped higher than it actually is.
Yeah, probably. I don't really know much about Pakistan, if that's the country that they conducted this study in, but
Yeah,
that totally is a possibility.
their address is at least in Pakistan, though I don't know anything about Pakistani sleeping habits, and I can't find anything really fast.
Well, they have over a 95% Muslim population, then several Muslims pray during like the night. So we can therefore conclude that at least some of those people probably pray during the night, even when they're students.
Oh yeah, right. The praying is actually done. I've seen my roommates pray at night, and then they went back to bed in the morning, but they just actually slept in one chunk, monophasic. So I don't know. It could be different for other people.
So yeah, that could be the possible definition that they have for biphasic, waking up at night and then sleeping afterwards. And the ones that are polyphasic could probably be the ones that break up their core sleep during the night and then have maybe a siesta during the day.
Well, it's pretty strange because they define the biphasic as sleeping during the night and then during the day. But overall, this study has a large lack of definitions. Like uh, it would have been nice to see some concrete schedules that these people had, or more concrete definitions of what they counted as monophasic versus polyphasic sleep. Like if you sleep for 8 hours but take a wake up for 30 minutes in that chunk, is it still monophasic according to these people, or is it polyphasic?
Yeah, true. It would be much better if we have that kind of data. I mean, I'm just gonna assume that it's Everyman or Uberman or Dmaxion along that line, because those three kinds of schedules actually rampant pretty much everywhere when everyone says any mention about the polyphasic sleeping. I'm pretty sure it's just one of those three, or all of them.
Well, if that was the case, I think their sleep duration would have been significantly shorter. Uh, if polyphasic sleepers slept more than monophasic sleepers, I think it would be pretty strange if you had like 40 people sleeping Uberman and then 10 people sleeping, 22 hours a day.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would
Okay.
also expect that most of the people, of the polyphasers in this study, were just sleeping some form of random, or perhaps E2 extended or something. Like just very long, but perhaps not completely randomly.
Yeah, I mean, if you still find websites on the internet, even last year, 2018, talking about the most dominant polyphasic sleep schedules and what you can try, and they only list every man, woman, and Emaxion, then I'm pretty sure you can't expect anyone in 2013 to actually know anything more than that. Or if they actually practice something different from those three, then, for example, they actually did practice something like DC1, they probably wouldn't have recognized it anyway. So, yeah.
Or there won't have been a box to check on the survey, at least. Does anyone else have something to add to the discussion still?
Well, maybe it would be interesting to take a look at the data if they would have an appendix that would be possible to find how they conducted this survey, which questions they asked specifically, because they
It's not
analyzed the
in
data with
this.
SBS.
It's not in this document, at least.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, you can always email them and find out. I'm pretty sure that they don't mind getting the data, but it would be very interesting to take a look at how they did the survey, which kind of questions they asked and how they asked them, because the way they analyze this data is very strange.
Yeah, absolutely. Feel free to do that. Just go ahead and send them an email.
Yeah, I think I might send it from my student email account and just ask them for the statistics because they used SPSS for analysis, so it should be no problem to get that data.
Yeah, I mean, you can do that, but there's also a chance that they didn't do it at all, because the data was just so inconsistent and so out of place that they didn't know how to present it in the study because it probably didn't show any relevance. But anyway, I mean, you can totally ask.
Yeah, it's probably interesting to take a look at significance, if the data was statistically significant and how it correlated as well, because maybe it just didn't even matter. And yeah, I mean, I'm going to definitely send an email and keep you guys updated on if I get an answer.
Sure. Oh, there's one point in here. Some studies in undergraduates pointed out that non-uniformities of 2 to 4 hours in the sleep-wake schedules are linked with greater tiredness, moodiness, and lower level of performance. And that students with irregular sleeping schedules had increased daytime lethargy in compared to classmates. So they actually did mention something about the ultradian rhythm or the basic rest and
I think this is just if you go to sleep way later than regularly, you'll feel bad. Or am I misinterpreting something here?
I mean, it only makes sense to assume that this is about the ultradian rhythm or the Bragg cycles, basic rest and activity cycles that they probably talking about. So my guess is that someone who doesn't follow this rule, like a 2 or 4 hour rhythm in human being, like sleeping randomly all over the place, probably has a higher chance to suffer all of these symptoms. But of course, I'm not entirely sure on this. So it would be a great point to ask about it as well, if what they were talking about was actually the one that I anticipated.
Ultradian rhythms haven't been really talked about in research since the 1980s. I highly doubt that this has anything to do with it. It's most likely, as Jelt says, that this is like those who go to sleep later feel worse. Just a proof that irregular scheduling uh, leads to worse results in cognitive performance.
Okay, but other than that, non-uniformities of 2 to 4 hours probably, yeah, like Giote said, going to sleep 2 to 4 hours later or earlier or something of that inconsistency. That makes sense too.
Well, I mean, we could read those studies for next week. They're sourced there. We can just open them up and read them until next time.
Yeah, for sure. If they are more recent and polyphasic related studies out there that we can analyze with a little bit more intensive setup and intensive data collection, then that would be great. But I guess this one is fair, suggesting that biphasic sleeping is the best, which I don't disagree with. And I mean, I often encourage people, at least in the community, to do biphasic sleeping because sometimes it is severely underestimated how potentially troublesome it can be later on. Because later on, I've seen people complain that they still can't even fall asleep in the nap, even after like 20 days in or something like that. So apparently easier said than done. And I also see that it is not that uncommon for people who are new to polyphasic sleeping and just straight up jump to, for example, E2 or E3 or something of that level without even doing biphasic sleeping like E1, and then realize that well, E3 doesn't really fit them, or even E2 for that matter. And also the difference in the biphasic sleeping scheduled in this community and from Polyphasic Society website much early on was not the same as the biphasic sleeping done in the study at all because we opt for less duration total. So that means that the sleep deprivation will actually occur, unlike the non-compressed sleep that the students actually got from their sleeping parents during the survey. So my guess is that if they happen to do the biphasic sleeping that we have designed, then it's probably more of a struggle for them, if anything. Okay, and I think that's all what I have to say for this research article. And I don't think I have anything else to add at all for the conclusion of the study.
Yeah, I don't think there's much still left out. So if everyone agrees, then we'll just close today's discussion and we'll be back next week sometime.
Yeah, this discussion will actually be uploaded to YouTube in case you don't know yet. So if you just stay in here and just listen, then that's totally fine. You will have a chance to listen to the whole thing if you missed the earlier parts that we talked about. And in the sleep research discussion channel, I have posted my presentation as a follow-up for you to look at the summary of the study. And the original article was also posted in here as well for you to look at for reference and more detailed analysis. And next week, Saturday, I think, we'll host another one. And we'll probably try to find something about polyphasic sleeping that is not too overly complicated and also easier to follow. We've had actually a pretty decent number of attendance today, so we're very happy to see that there are actually people interested in more polyphasic sleeping study and more recent researches or discoveries. There have been no official breakthrough that we really make because we haven't really come into contact with any representative from the sleep research science community and stuff like that. So I mean, one day when it becomes real, then polyphasic sleeping will probably be a lot more common than it is now. So that's all I have to say, and see you everyone for next week.
Appreciate it.
Hopefully.
Yeah, it's gonna be around the same time as the one today because a lot of people seem to show up today. So I'm just gonna keep the time consistent around this time next week.